Good morning and welcome to our webinar from Generative to Agentic AI, What's Next for Workplace Management. My name is Ted Ritter. I'm the Global Co-Chair for the IT community of IFMA and thrilled to have Corbett here to share some really good insights on what's next. A couple things about the IT community. We're actually the oldest component outside of a chapter within IFMA. So definitely know the college or community. We have a very global reach, and we push out content, every week, every month. And really, we try to answer just one question, which is how does technology support CRE and FM? The fact that technology changes at a very rapid rate means we don't run out of content, and we really want to collaborate and share best practices, case studies. Um, I was in Denver yesterday with the Denver chapter of IFMA and kind of asked the question, how many were members of councils of communities? And I was surprised that only about 10% were. Councils and communities are really important. Councils are vertical market aggregations. So if you're interested or have specific focus on specific verticals, definitely suggest looking at a council membership, whether it's airport facility councils, public sectors, legal, utilities. It's the aggregation of those individuals around the world that come together to share best practices within their vertical. Communities are more horizontal thought leaders. Everybody uses tech. Everybody does. So there's 7 communities besides technology, O&M, real estate, um, ESIS, which I need to update the slide because it's now sustainability. That's great. Business leadership, and of course, workplace evolutionaries. Want to do a shout out for our members, say thank you. We have over 250 members in over 32 countries now, but our followers have grown to over 5,000. If you want to follow us on LinkedIn, click on the QR code or just look for IT community on LinkedIn. We do tend to publish once or twice a week. Resources. We have some really good resources on the IT community website. I think we've got over 150 articles and presentations available. We've also relaunched our directory. There's over 120 technology providers referenced there. So check it out. There's a lot of cool stuff there, and a lot of it is cross-referenced on the IFMA Knowledge Library. As I said, we like to share case studies and best practices, and we're busy every year. ITC members participate in every event that IFMA produces, and quite a few that are aligned in the marketplace. And with that, I'm going to say thank you again to Corbett for sponsoring this webinar. I'd like Natalie Appleton and Travis Kemp to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Ted. I'll start. I'm Travis Kemp. I'm the Vice President of Product Management at Corbett. My background is both in digital signage, space management, electronics manufacturing, and I've been with Corbett for about 16 months now.
Awesome. Well, my name is Natalie Appleton, also a member of the Corbett team. I am the Vice President of Workplace, which means that I've spent 18 years now focused on the workplace experience in a variety of different markets and segments, and have really been pleased to be part of the IFMA and IT community for a number of years as well. So we're excited to share some insights with you today.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. I think it's going to be a really good conversation. I can't wait to see what you have to share with us. But first, I think we've got a poll. Actually asked these questions yesterday at the Denver chapter meeting, and the responses were really interesting. I think, most people, raised their hand and said, yes, a few times a week for sure. A few occasionally. No one raised their hand when I asked, less than once per month. No one, not one. But there was a good contingent that's like, I haven't used AI yet. I'm intimidated, which I found really surprising because it seems like everyone has, but it's not the case. So I think we've got a ways to go for adoption. What are you guys seeing?
Yeah,
See
I
that
think
as-
Jump
Sorry,
in.
go ahead, Travis.
I was gonna say, I was gonna say, even across, my coworkers and colleagues across the industry, I see that as well, right? You have a wide variety of adoption. I think we'll talk a little bit about that today, stemming from, power users using it all day, every day to, hey, I've heard of it. I want to learn more, and really everything in between. So not surprised to hear that.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to echo. Both within our internal teams, even at Corbett, there are some that are leaning in and just becoming overly efficient. And for me, that's encouraging to say, hey, I've got to lean in further than I thought that I was
Mhm.
at a good pace. But especially to adoption is such a big topic, like kind of the initial topic is adoption, and how do we enable the users to adopt the AI that maybe an organization might have and make them comfortable because I feel like that's it. It's that nervousness that,
Yeah,
really makes them kind of step back or no, I don't want to or I don't need to. So, helping to make that adoption a little more proactive and also positive.
yep. So we've got the results of the poll up. So about 60% several times a week, good. About once a week, 27%, less than once per month, okay? And no one fessed up to never using it at all. But so good adoption with our audience today. I'll kick it forward, and I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say about what are those differences between generative and agentic AI?
Yeah, and I think this is a great starting point because whenever you talk about AI, it's really important to pause and define what do we actually mean by AI, right? Because the term's used everywhere. It's synonymous with things like chatbots, automation, futuristic robots that we see in sci-fi movies, et cetera. So I think this slide helps kind of ground generative versus agentic. And so maybe we'll start with generative and really at its core, generative is focused on creating content, right? And that content can be a variety of things. It can be things like text, images. It can be music, right? Or
Mhm.
software code itself. But the point is that the human role is crucial with generative because the human is providing the prompts, telling the model what to do, what not to, giving it guidance, and really helping it predict. You see generative used heavily now in the workplace for things like idea generation, brainstorming, content production, with Chat GPT, Copilot, Gemini being there, as very commonplace examples. Before I jump into
Absolutely.
it, agentic, yeah, go ahead, Natalie.
Yeah, I was gonna say for me personally and professionally as well, generative is just fun, right? It's creating something. And I think it was about this time last year, it might have fallen right in line with IFMA World Workplace last year that everybody was posting on LinkedIn like the generative version of themselves as a facility manager with like a couple of cues that were personal to them, right? Like you can generally find me wearing really nice tennis shoes. I love nice tennis shoes. And so like that was what was in my generative AI FM kind of kit. So I just think it's really fun. And so generative I feel like sometimes does have maybe a little more adoption because it's like a positive output. At least that's from my perspective what I kind of see in that space. And that maybe is why more people are engaged with it because it doesn't seem quite as scary because it has some really nice implications there.
Yeah, spot on. And I think you're right. I think the adoption of generative is far more prevalent than agentic. I think agentic is catching up, right? And again, the difference between generative and agentic is agentic is not just focused on creating content, it's focused on creating autonomous actions, right? And so the human role shifts here from really hand holding the model to providing it with instruction or an end goal that the agentic AI will then take and handle itself. But it still needs oversight, right? It still needs oversight. You can't. It's called Copilot for a reason. It's not called autopilot, right? But there's some great use cases with agentic, whether it's automating workflows, helping aid decision making, acting on behalf of users, um, things along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the agentic, whereas I feel like generative is kind of again that really fun creation and creative component, the agentic is really helping to augment what you have to engage with. So taking some of those smaller, more minute or redundant tasks and really making them concise. So as that human role or interaction, you still need oversight, you still need to review it, but you get to the root or the core of the content so much quicker. Right? Without having to, even just in your own mind, think through, okay, what do we talk through? What are the action points? What's the next steps? It really kind of races you closer to the finish line just to make you more efficient. So I really also am excited about the agentic, but again, they're in my space, two very different lanes, but both use that AI umbrella, which is sometimes where I think there might be not necessarily confusion, but just which category does it go in? How do I feel about it? And what's my adoption?
And so again, right? So generative is really focused on what can I create for you? Agentic, what can I do for you? I think as a leader myself and as is Natalie, what does that mean for us, right? So I think a couple things. With Agentic, it's how much decision making do you hand off? What is that trust? What is that oversight? Where is that line between what my human team handles versus AI? But it's also things like security and governance, right? I mean, this comes up, even here at Corbett with the AI that we've rolled out. Security and governance is right there at the top of the list in terms of concerns, because you want the AI to act responsibly. You want it to act as you would expect, your human colleagues to. And then what is that value, right? What is the AI? What is that ROI on the AI? And how much more efficient or productive can I or can I not be? So, I think generative is really what got us started, but it's very heavily dependent on us. And I think agentic kind of takes it that next step, really, creating that automation and outcomes. And I think that's where you're seeing in the industry right now a ton of investment.
Yep, absolutely.
Small, so go ahead, Natalie.
Nope, sorry, go ahead, Ted. We're
I
good.
was looking back to yesterday, and we're used to it here now in Phoenix. I mean, Waymo got tested here. It's one of the first cities. It's
Yes.
everywhere. Waymo, there was someone who said, I saw one of those things for the first time yesterday. So it's happening in Denver right now, and they're freaking out. But in terms of agentic AI, I mean, that's pretty heavy duty agentic AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
The Waymo though too, because again, I'm in Phoenix as well, Ted, as you know, and it's not only it was a little scary, right, to think like I'm going to get in this vehicle with
Mhm.
nobody driving it and trust, really trust. I mean, that's like the ultimate level of trust, right? The physical trust of, entering one of these spaces. But they've been here for maybe a couple years now, and now you can't go a block without seeing at least one, if not in
Mhm.
a line. So
Yep.
I think, in a consumer application of AI, how maybe again you're a little timid at first, but as soon as we all start to step in, it kind of just spreads. And as to your point, Ted, now is in Denver and I think a few other cities where I guess it's where the roads must be bigger and wider, to give it a little leeway is where they're starting. But yeah, I mean, that's just probably the most consumer focused AI that, you physically see and the level of trust that you have to
Yeah.
hand over is really significant.
yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting observation for that lady in the audience. So she was like, I saw one. I was like, let me. You're right about the trust. It takes a little while. It takes a little while.
Absolutely.
Want to talk about hype and stuff?
We love to talk
Sure.
about trust. Absolutely. So yeah, again, I think where, we kind of start with that definition of AI and it encompassing a lot and seeing those two letters next to each other in every talk track, in every session, in every webinar, like ours as well, just trying to do that level set. So there is a lot of hype, which is amazing because we want to get excited about it. But as we mentioned, it does go hand in hand with the trust. What do we want to trust, to Travis's point, that is a human team member interaction versus, just AI, and let them, kind of move through those activities.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this slide, we wanted to focus on because there is a difference between what we see with the hype and where we are in reality. For example, with autonomy, you see plenty of fodder around, self-operating agents, completely set it and forget it. the AI will run on its own. And there are certainly examples, great examples, helpful examples where that is the case. But what I see is kind of a trust but verify approach, right? So deploy, let's go back, let's look at the results, let's look at the data, let's make sure that we're heading down the right path to scale, the Agentic's capabilities. But it's still semi-autonomous, right? It's not completely autonomous in most use cases. But the point being the ROI, right? So these agentic capabilities can certainly accelerate processes, accelerate workflows, take work off of our plate, scale our teams. But I think that oversight is key. And then speed, right? So, instant results. I want microwave results. AI is pretty quick. I think this one is less of an issue. In most cases, you're talking about latency of seconds, which is pretty acceptable to most, but it is not incredibly instant. But at the end of the day, time equals money, things along those lines. So I think what you should really focus on with speed is what is your time to value. Even if it takes 30 seconds instead of 5 minutes, that's still some real time savings. I know in our case, we deployed and released some generative AI for digital signage that takes the content creation down from minutes to literally seconds, and that's real time back. That's how you scale a team. But it is, there is some level of reality there where it's not incredibly instant. Yeah, anything you want to say on those?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's one of the big things too when we talk about AI and kind of that marriage of hype and trust is also just defining what are you trying to achieve with the AI that you are putting in place, right? So if you can set the expectation, then that also helps because maybe again, is it semi-autonomous or is it fully, self-operating? By setting those expectations, you kind of are building, at least a form of what the process is and the expectation. So that helps them to align a little bit more, is just to know what that expectation is. And I think, too, for the speed, that's where I think when everybody wants, to be able to be more efficient, ROIs on everybody's, top of mind, do more with less, adding more to teams, as far as responsibilities. And so with the ability to be so much more efficient and close to instant, like to Travis's point, 30 seconds versus 5 minutes. That's 4.5 minutes that now you get back to either critically think, change, topics, engage in a different way. So, even those smaller components of minutes and seconds, they add up throughout the day. So now you've got this ability to just not just be more efficient at the task at hand, but to think a little bit bigger, right? Be a little more critical in your next steps and actions. So the speed, I think, is definitely the biggest value proposition with leveraging AI in the workplace. And also those redundant tasks, right? We all have them. Like if we can take those off and so that way they get done and to the level of ability that's acceptable and we do still have the oversight, how much more also are you invested in your role, right? Because you can do more in the same amount of time during the day.
Yeah, then I look at, if you go to cost efficiency and trust, I mean, I look at the overall monetization of AI, almost similar to electricity or a utility. And by that, what I mean is you generally pay for what you use, right? And if you think about electricity, the first time you turn on a new lamp in a room, feels magical, feels very cheap, but you leave that light on 24/7, it starts to add up. And so what we're seeing with AI is maybe some higher cost up front as you iterate and you kind of fine tune your approach, generally paying for things like API calls and compute. Once you have it refined, that cost comes down over time because you've optimized your use of AI. But it does take a little bit of time. It's not necessarily an overnight process, and those loops do add up. So you want to be mindful of that. And then again, trust, right? Again, big focus on trust but verify. The hype says AI can be a reliable advisor, but trust but verify really boiled down. You want to make sure that it's explainable, and then security falls into that trust, right? Making sure the data is encrypted, not exposed. Making sure that it's not training models if you don't intend for the models to be trained on your data, things along those lines. And the last thing
Yeah.
I'll just say on trust would just be consistency, right? If you ask, you want some sort of pattern recognition there where the AI is consistently providing you quality output.
Absolutely. And I think with the trust, again, it almost spans every segment, every industry, security, right? Security is the top. Like you could have an amazing application with awesome AI, and if it's not secure, it doesn't matter. So, we try, especially at Corbett, to keep that top of mind, and to make sure that, we are walking through those security gates, so that way we are, offering a great solution, but also making sure it's secure. So I do know that also, I think even with the trust and also the user trust, right? Like if I do this, what's going to happen? So having that security checkbox up front, is really helpful because again, it's necessary in just about anything. And with data, we don't want it exposed. Travis mentioned encryption. Those are always big things, that we want to make sure that we're checking that box. So as we walk through any AI agent and that, potentially optimize workflow, which is great, we can know we're secure. We're not exposing anything. The efficiency one is another topic I just wanted to kind of just expand on a little bit more. Travis definitely mentioned a little more cost up front to kind of get going. Once you ramp up, then you can optimize those costs, which I think is something that maybe isn't discussed as much. You see that kind of price up front, and maybe that has the ability to make leadership kind of shy away of like, well, I don't really know. But if you kind of look at what that's going to be long term, the ROI, the time savings, what's the value of the time of the users using whatever AI you're putting into place? I think sometimes that makes that a lot more palatable. And also to know that, as we span out, that might be an optimization of cost as well. And it can accelerate, right? So you get the model down, and not only are you finding more efficient in certain tasks, now you can almost have that flywheel approach, right? Where just keep adding to it. And that way, you see that level of innovation open up exponentially because you trust it. You've got the investment. You've kind of, worked to make sure that we know what the workflow is, the expectation is, and now we just keep adding to it. And I think that's what's really exciting too, especially even as a user, to say, well, what else can I do with this? What else can this help me with? And that's where maybe that trust links back to hype. Like, okay, let's keep going. So, it might even be more of a circle between the hype
Yeah.
and trust that's kind
Yeah.
of constantly revolving.
Yeah. I think the last thing I wanted to say on trust, and that's spot on, Natalie, is governance, right? And so it's interesting to me because when you look at the pace at which AI is evolving, I mean, you're seeing new models come out, in this case, several times a week, really, at this point. You're seeing
Well,
startups become born at very rapid paces. There is no global AI governance body, right? I mean, so obviously, regionally, you see standards becoming more prevalent, but we're still very much in the early stages of that. And so what I see specifically like at the enterprise level is really a myriad of thoughts around governance, right? So things like, do I want the model to train based on my data? Like I said, things like encryption. At the mid and SMB levels, you see a little bit more open-ended. We're not really sure how to think about governance and AI. Should we govern this? How do I think about the culture of AI? So that's something that's very much still evolving and will evolve. But see it as an important step, really to combat a number of fears people have and organizations have regarding AI.
Absolutely. And I think it's kind of that balance too of right risk versus reward. Like, what's the risk I'm willing to take for the reward I'm going to get?
That's right.
And at the enterprise level, just because they're enterprise, right? More resources, more, I guess, groups and teams to kind of think and assess versus the SMB, they're just making it happen, more reactive than maybe having the ability to really critically think about what they should be governing. So I also think it's so great to look at those that are leaning in further sooner to learn from what they've done, right? Learn from what they've learned. So I think that's also something to just consider is who's doing it, whether it's your neighbor right? Within your organization, another organization that you shared the building with, a collaboration committee or board that you're on, and just kind of, share your experiences and just learn from them. And then you can always take that back, right? And just you're two steps further down the process because you were able to collaborate on what others in your industry or in your geography or in your role are doing with AI. So I think that's another important thing that we all have as this is still so new. There's not global governance. Is just kind of lean on each other, learn from each other, so that way we can all grow.
Um, Interesting about the governance. I mean, it's kind of following kind of what's generally accepted as far as data privacy and concerns in
Yeah.
different
Mhm.
regions. I mean, was it World Workplace Europe and in the Netherlands earlier this year? And AI is prevalent everywhere there, but that data governance and more GDPR, it's like, are you sure you want to let you get those messages pop up there and you don't hear it. So it really kind of depends, but there needs to be something. I want to talk about the modern workplace a little bit.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
let's do it.
Perfect. I mean, I think this kind of culminates into everything that we've been saying. So, what's the definition? Where do we see it? And what are those pillars to get it in action? And then part of that action is in the workplace, right? And the modern workplace, I feel like, is subject to interpretation based on what that means for you within your organization, within your role, because I don't think there is one, golden definition that encompasses everything, because I think that, it's still very much evolving. But with AI and the modern workplace, really looking at facility managers and, those that are leading and have a lot of, sorry, a lot of activities to take care of throughout the day and the week and the month. And how do we make that a little bit easier, a little bit more palatable. And I think, with AI and specific AI that is going to be helpful to you, really everything from cutting costs, experience, which I'm going to talk about more because experience has to be at top of mind as well when you think about the modern workplace, but just also helping things to run smoothly. So, looking at those challenges that we've got outlined below. But again, I think the modern workplace is, what does that mean to you? Right? And then how do we get the right tools in place to support what you're doing, what your organization is looking to focus on strategically?
Absolutely. And I think when, boil down, the modern workplace is expensive to operate, right? When you think about real estate footprints, things like energy costs, underutilized spaces, whether it's desks, rooms, infrastructure, I think bottom line is how, organizations are asking, how do I do more with less? I think it's a really interesting time, both in terms of the emergence of AI combined with where we are, in this modern workplace post-pandemic. Am I hybrid? Am I working from home? Am I in the office? What does that look like? I think organizations at scale are really trying to solve, um, you know, getting their arms wrapped around things like costs. And I think it's also more than just cost cutting. It's like redeploying those savings, right? It's
Mhm.
redeploying those savings or and reinvesting them into areas that create more value, better collaboration tools, employee well-being. Um, so it's, how do I create that impact and redeploy it and scale it for all of my employees, not just, a small subset. So absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think with the cost savings and the redeployment is key, right? So it's not just about, cutting and saving. It's how do we better utilize that cost savings and where do we deploy it? So what I think about and what we talk a lot about with our customers and partners is experience, right? So again, the modern workplace is still evolving and not everybody's in every single day most of the time across most organizations, depending on your industry. And so when they come in, how do we make that experience optimal? And so instead of having, 50 conference rooms that are kind of hodgepodge outfitted with certain technology, and then the ones that have the great tech, are always overbooked. And those, you kind of see that decline, based on the tech sometimes in the room. How do we say we don't need 20 that are, kind of, but we want 10, and this is what we want to redeploy in those 10 spaces is just making that experience better. And not just the experience in the office, but I don't know about you, I've never been to even an in-office meeting that didn't have somebody participating virtually. So again, we need to have that equity in the meeting, and a lot of times that is dependent on the tech. It's not just about the people around the table. It's how do we make sure that the experience and the equity in those conversations is sufficient, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'll give a different spin on experience and trust as well, which is I think there's a bit of an evolving culture around AI in the workplace. And although I wasn't alive for it, I kind of think of it similar to what I assume it was like when the calculator was rolled out, right, and invented. It's almost like, am I cheating if I use this? Is this okay? Things along those lines. That's certainly one force at play. I see other situations where, flat out employees are not going to use AI if they don't trust the output it's given, right?
Mhm.
That's another kind of lens on trust. So that predictability, that repeatability that we talked about earlier. And then the third pillar I see is like, what data is this collecting on me? How is this being used? What would device activity, patterns, things along those lines. So all of those points to say, transparency and leadership drives a lot of this, right? You need to have very clear and transparent guidelines on the use of AI, its adoption, what those expectations are, and really, as long as you're deploying it in a way where you can get measurable results, you've seen very good outcomes. But those results do need to be measurable, right? This shouldn't be a situation where you're just trying to check a box to appease, external body. This should create real value. And once you create that value, you keep, like I said before, reinvesting and building on that. So, um, that's a good segue into future proofing, right?
Mhm.
How do yeah, now that you want to jump in there first, do you want me to?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that's exactly it. It's kind of defining what the objective is. And also, leadership was just a really good point. Just to expand on a little bit more, is if leadership's not supporting your AI initiatives, it's not going to go very far because then the trust is immediately lost, right? You don't want to do something that your leaders aren't championing, that they're not behind, that they're not doing themselves, right? So that's another layer, which sometimes can be difficult or sometimes really easy, just depending on who's at the executive leadership within your organization. You could go either way very easily. And as the users, as it funnels down to the users, they will often, follow suit. So that leadership adoption, and also support, I think, is really big in moving into that pillar of experience and trust. If leaderships are using it and trust it, then it will, definitely funnel down a lot faster. And then with, again, perfect segue into future proofing. So, as we continue to identify and go through these challenges, looking forward, there's nothing for just today, right? Today's going to be different than tomorrow, and then next week, and then next year, and so on. And so wanting to the best of your ability, future proof, so that way we have the ability to evolve with those technologies that we're adopting, especially if it's enterprise wide. If everybody's using it, we want to make sure that, we're not going to hit a hurdle or a breaking point, in the future. We want to make sure that we're continuing, and that maybe even falls back into the trust within the organization of the tools they're choosing, right? So they're all connected and are linear for sure, but then sometimes do double back.
Yeah, well said. I think it's important to define future proofing, right? What we're not saying is, you need to predict the future perfectly. What we're really saying is you need to be resilient enough to adapt no matter what comes, right? So things like deploying interoperable systems, hybrid ready technology, AI platforms that are invested in and that can scale as your organization scales, right? Things
Mhm.
along those lines. Just, like I said previously, with the litany of how fast AI is evolving and adapting, you just want to make sure you're not, constricting your organization by way of not thinking about interoperable systems and things along those lines. You want to be able to just kind of, be agile, as I said
Sure.
before.
And I think part of that future proofing is definitely with the technology and scalability and kind of future and roadmap and making sure of those things, but also the vendor or the partner that you're working with, right? So I think that's a component to think about too. So there is the tech, of course, that's what you're going to be executing against. But what about the vendor, the partner? Like, what are they looking at? What are their strategic initiatives? What does their roadmap look like? And what has it been? So how consistent are they, with staying aligned with their own roadmap? So those are some of the ways, again, because nobody can predict what's coming next, but if you do some of that diligence, that will make you even more agile as things do evolve and change in the modern workplace.
Got one question that's come in tied to trust. We'll get to that in a minute. Um, can I ask a question?
Yeah, of
Please.
course.
No, I went through your website. I was looking at, kind of what's new in the five agents and how I work together. And I would love to hear more about that. I know we don't have a graphic for that on the slide deck, but I find that fascinating. And the way it was described, I mean, made total sense to me. But could you guys describe kind of what that is and what they might be able to see next week in Minneapolis?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll jump in here first, Natalie. So,
Yeah.
Ted, you just took the words right out of my mouth. So, a couple months back, we unveiled our plans for what we're calling our 5C AI strategy.
Mhm.
These are five core kind of agentic AI capabilities that are fostered in or rooted in two things: productivity and efficiency. And so they span both the concepts of digital signage and communication, but also very much space management and the best use of your space. One of the things you'll be able to get a preview on next week or at IFMA is something we're calling Corbett Concierge, which is really an AI-driven natural language chat interface in which you can have it act on your behalf and drive your space management ecosystem, whether it's creating, recurring meetings with 10 people, whether it's looking at availability across my team's calendars to find the most optimal time to meet. Again, reducing the amount of time I'm spending manually, kind of giving you that time back. Another great example of this, and the first C that was unveiled is called Corbett Create. And this was very much rooted in generative AI, but it's the concept of using generative AI to efficiently create digital signage content, right? And so what we see is, the content creators are spending anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds creating content with Corbett Create, whereas previously they were spending 10 to 15 minutes, right? So it's a massive amount of time savings. And it's not about using those time savings to replace employees. It's really to extend the productivity of the team you have to do more with less. So it's been really powerful. And, I think in addition to creating productivity gains and efficiency gains, it's about giving you the flexibility to include the human interaction. I always look at what we're doing with Corbett Create as like an 80-20 rule where maybe AI takes it 80% of the way with a human putting their fine touch on it to take it the final 20. Maybe I don't like the imagery. Maybe I don't like the text. I want to fine tune it. Totally get it, right? That is where we are. The other C's I have not mentioned would be a command, Corbett Command, and this is
Mhm.
focused on device management, AI-driven device management to put our AV and IT professionals in a position to be more proactive with their device management than reactive. And then Clarity, right? Clarity is very much focused on AI for analytics, really bubbling up those key takeaways, putting myself and Natalie in a situation where she and I are interpreting data sets the same way very efficiently and in a cost-effective manner. So yeah, very, very excited about that. We're starting with five, but six, seven, eight, nine are well on their way as well.
I'm sure they are the
Yeah.
horizon. And I think too, with the agents and just kind of everything that Corbett is doing, and I think what a lot of organizations are hopefully looking for is it's the entire workplace experience. So there are specific use cases, absolutely. There are specific user journeys, but it's all about the experience. So making it easier, the 80-20 rule, doing more with less, optimizing, and also just having a good experience, right? So that's as well, like having a positive experience because you can trust it. The data is consistent, it's secure. So, all of the things that we've kind of mentioned thus far, are all pulling together to support that not just modern workplace, but the experience that the users, that the team members, that the employees, that the leaders are having in the workplace, because that's so important. Because experience is, it's definitely a feeling, but it's what makes you kind of feel more positive or kind of indifferent or negative. And so if we can optimize that using great tech, then I feel like that's a win for everybody.
Yeah, and I think like it's a great point. Like another factor we see is like adoption, right? So,
Hmm.
if you've been in an organization doing a job well for 5, 10, 15 years, you may have a very set way to do things. And that adoption may feel uncomfortable. So it's a bit of change management adoption. But we see, and that's where leadership comes in, right? You need to kind of foster that, provide the training necessary. But that's how you create that future proofing that we discussed earlier.
Absolutely. And as somebody who, like, I know I mentioned, and it was in my intro, it's been 18 years that I've been focused on the workplace. And in some ways, it seems like, well, that's kind of a long time. Like, don't you know everything? Aren't you kind of done? I'm like, no, there's so many exciting things constantly. And so I think that even with tenure, that ability to be agile is exciting, right? And refreshing to kind of say, yeah, I've been here. We've got this great thing going, but how do I make it better? How do I optimize? Also, how do I enable my teammates? And those that might have redundant tasks that maybe we can, take off their plate or restructure, or again, that 80/20 rule. I really like that a lot. Like 80% of it, is just kind of, it needs to get done, but can it be done more efficiently? So then more, again, as that human augmentation of I'm into the important parts, into the root of what we're looking to achieve.
Wonderful. Oh, that was great. Thank you. And
Yeah.
look forward to seeing agents in action. Is that okay to say that? Agents in
Oh, it
action.
is okay to say
Absolutely.
that. I do like
Um,
that a lot.
question, and I'll try to paraphrase it with a really long question. Considering the trust issues as it relates to untrusted output, how can organizations look to adopt solutions so employees know how to better prompt and ask for the right answer? I think this is a really deep question, and I think there's a lot that we can talk about here. And this came up in Denver last week. I mean, last week. That was yesterday, not last week. Yesterday. Um, More than once. It's like, well, I get bad outputs. Like, well, how did you ever get trained on how to do a prompt? Nope. Okay. So, what do you guys think? What do you guys think about building trust, but also weaving in some training and orientation that's really practical?
Yeah, this is a big cause and effect, and you're spot on, Ted. So, what you're highlighting is the output, specifically with generative AI. The output is only as good as the input, right? And so, this concept is referred to as prompt engineering, and simply put, AI is really a predictive engine more than anything, and its ability to predict what it thinks you want to hear or see or feel is as good as that prompt. So
Hmm.
what we've seen work really well is when you create, like at the enterprise level, the organization creates really an AI focused, whether it's a subcommittee, governance board, but there has to be a focused group of people continually thinking and taking steps towards training. I know internally here at Corbett, that's what we do, right? Our CTO holds prompt engineering classes, if you will, where we'll
Hmm.
go through use cases and you know, kind of A/B test different prompts to see what works well, what doesn't, right? And the
Hmm.
other caveat there is different models behave differently to different prompts, right?
Yep.
ChatGPT compared to Claude, Perplexity, Gemini, they all have fine-tuned nuances. The other thing you can do, and I don't think a lot of people understand this, is you can actually ask the chat interface to help you create the prompt, right? And that's a very
Mhm.
quick and easy way to learn. And in addition to asking it to architect the prompt, you can really have it explain to you why it's architected it the way you are so that you can apply those learnings the next time, right? Things like that. But I'll go back to that kind of subcommittee governance board. We see a lot of value in that. This cannot be, for this to work, this cannot be someone's fifth job, right? Fourth or fifth job. This needs to be a focal area, which is going to help that adoption and cultural evolution as well.
Absolutely.
Long-winded
And
answer.
yeah, no, of course. And I think training is paramount, right? Like training and enablement, like your teams, your staff, your um your members can only do as well with the tech that they're given as they are enabled to use it, right? So, Travis mentioned, CTO doing prompt training. We do something called Training Tuesdays as well. That might be different for each department, but still relative because it can be different department to department, depending on the AI that you're using. So having that kind of consistent check-in, because it's also still evolving. It's not like you train once and you're done and you never have to think about it again. I think making sure that it's consistent and kind of top of mind, so that way it is evolving. It's not stagnant because AI has the potential for such widespread reach in a really positive way. But if you only say we're only going to use this, and here's your two prompts, and here's your one, app, then that's as far and as good as it's going to get. But if you keep thinking about it and keep coming back to it, then it just continues to refine itself, and kind of get more polished. And then people get more excited and they trust it because they trust the outputs because they have the training to do the prompt the right way, and so it just, again, is a really positive cyclical situation that just helps enable everybody.
Yeah. I think the other thing I'll just say on that question is, um, in addition to architecting, a well-written prompt that provides you the best output, I think another lens on this is the model choice. And I talked a little bit about this, but different models focus on different competencies better than others, right?
Mhm.
Some handle, if I'm a developer, some handle software code execution better. Some handle real-time news and events better than others, right?
Mhm.
There are models that incorporate things like really, really deep research. And those models may take 10, 15 minutes to provide you an output, but maybe that's what I need for my specific use case.
Sure.
Obviously, there are models focused on best-in-class image generation, whereas others are not. So, in addition to architecting the prompt, it's really important to use the right model for the right choice. And oh, by the way, most models will guide you on whether there's a better model for the choice. You can literally ask it that question, and it will provide recommendations.
I love that idea, Travis, of
Yeah,
just ask the chat that you're using. Like,
yeah,
just ask it.
exactly.
It's going to
Yeah,
tell you, right? And it's not going to tell you a biased answer. It's going to give
right.
you, some help along the way. So, I feel like I'm going to take that one as well.
Awesome. We've got another question. We've got another question from Dean Stanbury. I've seen more discussions lately around context engineering, moving beyond basic prompt engineering, context engineering. Does that resonate at all?
I'm not super familiar with the term context engineering as of late.
We'll get back to you. We'll talk to you next week, Dean, because I think that is a good conversation point for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
I was going to say, actually, just one other thing, because, the workplace is what we're all focused on, right? As, members of IFMA and the IT community, it's how do we do that? How do we optimize the experience? And um, another acronym, which I know we're all excited about, another acronym that I heard last week on a client site, which I thought I really appreciated it, was the IOE, the in-office experience. So thinking about what is your in-office experience, not just your workplace experience and your employee experience, because those can differ for sure if you are a hybrid or, a remote, partially remote employee. So that in-office experience and bringing together. And one big thing always, with the AI enablement and, great tools is there's also the people. right, at the end of the day. So if you can use certain technologies and AI to be more efficient in your role, then you also have the ability to, engage with your colleagues more. Like it just kind of, you saved yourself time in one place. How do we reinvest it in another? So other than the cost savings and reallocation, the time savings and reallocation. So that's something that, especially where, people really, I think, collaborate better in person. This is great, but that face to face, nothing sets those visual cues. I know I talk with my hands a lot. I'm trying to kind of keep them at bay a little bit today, but that experience of in office, in person, can also maybe be further expanded because we're able to use tools to be more efficient in some of those redundant tasks.
Excellent. Any kind of final thoughts before we run our closeout poll?
I would just say, in closing, like I said, like we've said, in summary, AI rollout requires leadership, right? It requires
Mhm.
forethought. Make sure that you're thinking through measurable outcomes. Again, trust but verify, but remain agile, right? The industry, the toolkit, they're evolving rapidly. What you see today will be very different than what we see 12 months from now. But go into it with eyes wide open through the lens of how can I create a more efficient, scalable enterprise.
Absolutely. And I think that positive initiation or how you go into it, open eyes and with kind of a positive state of mind, again, is often driven by leadership. So, making sure for those that are, from top down, really leaning in as well, I think also drives your adoption and trust.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much for sharing your insights with us today. Christy, you wanna roll up that closing poll? Oh, it's there. It's there. If you'd like more information today on Corbett or the IT community, and we can't vote, by the way, we can't vote for ourselves.
Wonderful. I know we like I said, on behalf of, Travis and myself and the Corbett team, super excited to be able to participate in today's session. AI is top of mind, so, any value that we can share based on our own experiences, not just as Corbett, but as those relationships and partnerships that we serve in with our customers, always happy to bring that to the group and share with the IT community and collaborate as well. We'd love to hear from you, what's happening in your organizations, what are questions, what are pain points, what are successes, and what are those things that we can learn from each other. So also excited that this is just perfectly aligned to really tee us up, hopefully, for next week and being in person in Minneapolis. I'm in Phoenix, so I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm very excited to be in less than 100 degrees next week. You have no idea how much I'm looking forward to the weather in Minneapolis 10 as well, I'm sure. But we're excited to see you guys and again have the opportunity to have a face-to-face dialogue in person next week during IFMA World Workplace.
Thanks again. We'll see you
Thank
guys
you.
next week.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Appreciate it, everybody. Bye
Perfect.
now.
Bye.